Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryant, with my permanent guest, Cammy. Hey there, Cammy.
Hey, Bryant.
What's going on today? How you doing?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing good, Cammy. I woke up. I always wake up pretty early so I can have a little me time before I take Kin to school. But when I went to the bathroom, I looked in the mirror and I was just enamored. And I just 30 solid Mississippi seconds of just staring at the mirror. One might call that what?
Narcissism?
Yes. And Cammy, did you know that there's a Greek origin to that word? Like almost
I did
all
know
of them.
that. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm very subtly alluding to what we're going to talk about today, and that is the story of Narcissus or Narkikos, if you want to go, like super Greek with it. This is a cool story too, and I love it. This is our second recent Greek one, I think, because we did sort of Damocles not too long ago, and while we touch on Greek and Roman myth a lot, we also cover a wide variety of topics. So if you're just joining us, you just started listening, we are touching on Greek myth, but we like to touch on anything from the Yeti to chupacabras, cryptids, all sorts of myths and legends. And so what we're going to do, Cammy's going to give us the story of Narcissus. It's so wonderful.
I've actually got a twofer today.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I noticed
because
that there's different ways that it's told.
Yeah, that story encompasses another myth that
Right.
is probably fun to tell children or something.
Yeah. Oh, really? I
Yeah.
was going to say, this is like etymology packed episode here, like because of the nymph and all that stuff. So this will be really fun. But Cammy, hit us with that story, and then we'll have a little discussion about it afterwards.
Absolutely. So I used classic myths to read aloud because it's easy to use that.
Ooh.
Can you read that? By William F. Russell.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Our story begins not with the youth himself, but with a nymph who suffered Hera's wrath. For when Hera came to seek vengeance on the nymphs who Zeus was known to frequent, Echo was there, just at the threshold of the valley, to prevent the goddess from journeying further. She was a loquacious being, and talked for hours on all manner of subjects trivial to the gods. Hera, growing tired of her words, struck her with a curse where she could only speak when spoken to, and she could only repeat the words spoken to her. Echo had lived this way for a while and was growing used to mimicking the speech of others. But one day she spotted a young man who was too beautiful to be mortal. Yet here he was before her. She could not speak to him and dared not repeat his words, but followed him on his daily romps through the forest. After weeks of watching his journeys through the shadows of the woods, Echo was in love with him. One day, out of luck, he lost his hunting party and began to call out, asking if anyone was here. Echo replied with "here." He could not see her at first, so he called again. She stepped from the forest, repeating "here." She ran to him and threw herself upon him, touching his strong arms and bronze neck. But he pushed her away from and ran from her. Echo was that sentence didn't make any sense. Echo was heartbroken, and she began to fade away until only her voice remained. She was known to lurk in the hills and valleys over the planet, traveling on the wind to new places. The other nymphs were disheartened by her fate, so they sought revenge. The nymphs prayed to the goddess Nemesis, who thought of a fast and sure punishment. She made Narcissus fall in love with himself. When he sees his reflection next, he will not be able to move from the spot and will waste away pining for himself. That day when he was hunting, he came upon a small creek, and when he looked into it to grab a sip of water, he saw the most beautiful man he had ever laid eyes on. He tried to encourage the water spirit to come to him, but then he realized it was his reflection in the water. He could not be more in love, and like young lovers often do, he forgot his task and need for food and drink and sat there by the creek staring at his love until he too wasted into nothing.
That's great. Yeah, and you nailed both of those, Echo and Nemesis, which apparently Nemesis is like a big deal. Echo is a nymph. So what's the best way to describe a nymph? Like a fairy kind of person, like a lesser half, not quite a
Sort of like a
god.
god without magic.
Yeah, yeah. I think they're considered like a different race almost in that. So yeah, echo, which the word echo, to repeat or hear something repeating. That's that. Although I don't know why Hera was like, your voice is so annoying. I'm gonna make you repeat everything I say and
Well,
mimic
she
me.
stopped her from
Having
getting
like,
revenge, basically.
yeah,
So, or catching him in the act or whatever.
right. But then yeah, the goddess Nemesis. She's a goddess of divine retribution and revenge. I mean, that pretty much speaks for itself. That we could probably do a whole show on her, but that's a fun. I never realized like that those two were involved in this. And so yeah, Narcissus, Narcissus is a way you'll kind of see it too. Remember, the C and the K is kind of funky in Latin and in Greek, especially when it came over to English. But this is a cool. So he's the son of a river god. So he is divine himself, and he's from Thespis or Thespeia. Sorry, some Greek there. Thespiae. I went straight to theoi.com. That's one of the best websites that we ever get to use whenever I start with the Greek stuff. Or Roman stuff. That's where I go, because they've just got some really cool stuff there to give us the information we need. But yeah, he's the son of the river god Kephisos or Cephasus, and that's exactly it. He's described as just being a hunter, not I think a remarkable hunter, but a remarkable beauty of a man, like absolutely stunning. And there's a handful of stories, but Ovid's is probably the most recited. That's, I think, what yours is based off of, essentially.
Yeah.
And and that is kind of where we get everything now. We mentioned Ovid a lot. Ovid was around from 43 BC to around 18 AD, just to give you kind of an idea. So turn of the millennium, the times, and he was a very prolific writer that kind of fused everything then. But it looks like Narcissus was around for quite some time. I kind of tried to see the earliest references for Narcissus. And we do have, according to theoi.com, Callistratus was, I think, a historian. He was a Greek writer from 350 BC. And so it looks like Narcissus was around for quite some time, especially because that was the name of the uh, flower, a daffodil, and it was its given name at that point, and that's really kind of where we get it. There's some sort of like suggestions about why that happened. Uh, one thing I really love. So there's one more recent. It's from 180 AD. Pausanias, in his writing, The Description of Greece. So this is translated on theoi.com, and I absolutely love this. So he apparently went to Greece. He kind of did a tour of Greece, which is really common for Romans. And he went to Thespis, and he went to the river Narcissus, and he was told the story of this man who apparently saw his reflection in the water and fell in love with himself. And this is what he wrote: "But it is utter stupidity to imagine that a man old enough to fall in love was incapable of distinguishing a man from a man's reflection." So this like learned Roman dude, he's like writing, and he's just like, "That's dumb. Like, you can't do that." And then, so it's just great because he's sort of recognizing like the idea of gods and pastimes and things like that. Like, yeah, I mean, those are real, but like this story is kind of dumb. And another thing from Pausanias that I really enjoyed was later in that writing, he writes, "The flower Narcissus grew, in my opinion, before this." So he was, the flower, the daffodil. If we are to judge by the verses of Pamphos, the Homeric hymn to Demeter, this poet was born many years before Narcissus the Thespian. And he says that Kore, or Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, was carried off when she was playing and gathering flowers, and that the flowers by which she was deceived into being carried off were not violets, but the narcissus. So if you don't if you're not familiar with some of these stories, like I'm not familiar with Persephone being carried off or anything like that while playing with flowers. But I just think
Have
it's
we not covered that? We should cover that.
maybe, yeah. I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't think so. But to me, it's just really cool because this is like history 101. He's using primary sources, like or at least he's using like oral history and a primary source. He's mentioning the Homeric hymn to Demeter, and he's trying to relegate whether the flower, was it called Narcissus? Was the flower, the chicken or the egg? Was it Narcissus and then the daffodil, or the daffodil and then Narcissus? And so I just thought it's really cool that this guy who was touring Greece and writing about it used these, what was considered history, to him. This wasn't myth to him in 180 AD. And he was trying to like work it out the same way as a modern historian would. So I thought that was a really fascinating.
He sounds like he just has always hated that myth, and
yeah,
it's like his thing,
Yeah, I've been reading more of the Robert Garland stuff and listening to his audiobooks. He's a great Greek historian, and he talks about how Romans, like, they love to like belittle the Greeks, even though they were enamored with their culture. And I mean, obviously, they were absolutely enamored. Like, oh, the Greeks are so stupid. I'm going to go spend like hundreds of dollars worth of whatever currency I have while I tour all of Greece. And I'm just going to be like, oh, I'm so much better than them, but I'm going to buy all that. And that's another thing. I'll post this in the YouTube video, or at least in a link. There are like statues and things like that, but they're Greek. They're not the Greek originals. They're copies, Roman copies, which was extremely common. You'd hire Greek statue makers to copy famous statues, and so they'd be Roman copies. So we don't really have many original things of that depict him. So it's kind of hard to say like how old, but it looks like Narcissus was definitely in the pantheon. This story was quite old, and it's really cool. Ancient EU, the great website, they actually suggest that oh no, was it Ancient EU or Britannica? It was a fear that this whole idea might be a fear of seeing your reflection. I mean, think about like you don't have access to a mirror like you would. You'd see it in the water, and so there might have been some sort of like thing
like magic or something to do with that.
Like just like a little scary thing of like seeing your reflection and how it's not good. And so that this might have been sort of a tale that either explains that, or maybe the tale is kind of what promoted that idea. And so I thought that was really great. But yeah, so Narcissus is an older story for the most part. That's where we get the name for the daffodil here. It took off in like Roman culture too. The story was very popular. Oh yeah, here we go. It was Britannica, excuse me. So the story may have derived from the ancient Greek superstition, that's the word, that it was unlucky or even fatal to see one's own reflection. And so I don't know, it's really interesting, but apparently Narcissus and his image and his story was more famous in Roman art than it was in Greek. We don't know for sure, but he was definitely highlighted in a lot of frescoes and paintings and things like that. But yeah, it's a wonderful story. Lots involved there with Echo, Nemesis, Hera, and I just thought that was fantastic. And it looks like too the being turned. There's an idea of like turning into your namesake. So think of Arachne turning into the spider, that kind of thing. There's this idea of it being like a sympathetic metamorphosis is a word that Theoi used. It's not uncommon in Greek myth for this. So this is why we call this that. This is why that's that. Spiders are called Arachne because Arachne was turned into it. We didn't have a name for it before that. So the daffodil was just flower, but then once Narcissus became it, now it's the daffodil. And I think that brings another reason why, as Pausanias would be like, that can't be right. It must have been that beforehand. So really cool. I liked this story for for that connection there. Obviously, we get these names; they have deep roots that have a deep, rich history in both Roman and Greek culture. And like I said, there's definitely sources from 350 BC that talk about this. Ovid was later than that, but he's probably one of the more popular ones that sort of kind of cleaned up the story and gave it the same way we do. Narcissus, he can be seen, he depicted typically, narcissistic is very negative. You don't want to be called a narcissist. I mean, unless you are one, then you do want to
Yeah,
be called.
and then you just admit it.
But in some cases, he's not like an ass. He's just a handsome looking guy, like, and that's it. That's his only crime. But in many other stories, he does act like a pompous, jerk. Everyone loves him, and he's just like, that's it. So yeah, and he's a hunter. That's it. Like half my sources mention that. Others like he's pretty. Don't worry about the hunting. Everyone was a hunter back then, but yeah, wonderful story. I'm a big fan of this one. I knew that Narcissus, that I knew that came from ancient Greek, but I didn't realize the story was so straightforward and fun for that. But thank you, Cammy, for your rendition of Narcissus. Poor Echo. Poor Echo. That's all I can say.
Yeah, my source actually mentioned him hunting as well. I don't know if I put that in the story. I
You
think I
did.
did. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, with the hunting party. Yeah. Yeah. So, which makes sense. I mean, you got to eat.
Yeah.
He's not going to eat daffodils. That's can't do that. Well, I think that covers our coverage of the story of Narcissus. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let us know if you have anything to add. Mythstorie@gmail.com is a great way to get directly in touch with us, but we've got our Facebook group and a bunch of other ways to get in touch with us, including a Discord that we created recently. There should be a link in the description, but also our Facebook group's a good way to find us as well. I think that covers it, right, Cammy?
I think so.
Awesome. Well, everyone, we will see you next time.
Oh.
I'm so beautiful.